Welcome back to another video with the Math Doc. We are continuing with our different formulas, still in the literal equation subject, where when we say literal equation, we mean an equation with more than one variable. Today we'll be looking at the simple interest formula, which is given by, I'll write it up here, I equals capital P times R times T, where I is the interest we can make from an investment, okay? P is our principal. It's the amount that we actually start with. The rate here, R, is an annual rate of interest. So that is an annual, and it's usually given by a percentage. And T is the time, which we usually also count in years. Okay, so if we put in a principal of $500 and our rate is 10% and we wait 1 year, we will make an interest of 500 times 10%, which is just 10 divided by 100 times 1, which is equal to $50. Okay, so basically that is what this formula gives us. It connects the time that we wait, the rate that we can earn from the bank, the principal, the amount of money we put in, to the interest that we actually make at the end of the period. Now, the thing is that sometimes we know these numbers. Sometimes we know the time, the rate, and the principal. But sometimes we don't know all of them. We may know the principal and the rate, and we know how much interest we want to make, but we want to figure out how much time that would take. So sometimes we're looking at different types of questions that will involve figuring out the values of different variables in this equation. And so we usually do what we do with a literal equation. And if you're new to this channel, or you haven't seen the literal equation playlist, please take a look. It's linked to this video. But what we usually do is we first try to solve for the variable that we would be looking for. So we will do this initially, and then we'll look at a few examples for each one of these variables. So we have I, again, we'll write down the equation. I equals principal times rate times time. And we can solve for any one of them. So for this top equation, it's solved for I, for the interest we make. But we can solve for P, for our principal. We can solve for R, our rate, and we can solve for T, the time in years. So when we solve for P, we have I equals P times R times T. We will use the division property of equations, and if you don't remember what that is, please take a quick look at the playlist for the linear equations. But basically we can divide both sides of the equation by the same factors. And here, since we want to isolate P, we want to solve for P, we will divide by the rate and the time, by R and T. And here on the right, these two cancel, right? Because we're both multiplying and dividing by the same variable, or the same number. And we're left with P equals, the principal equals, the interest that we make divided by the rate times time that we wait. So that is the solving for P. We do the same thing for the rate for R. Again, because we want to isolate R, we will divide by the factors that are multiplying it. So we will divide both sides by P times T, right? By both P and T. And so we get here again, these two cancel here, and we get R equals I, the interest, divided by the principal times the time that elapsed. So that's how we can figure out what our rate is. Finally, we do the same thing for T, which I wrote here twice. So by doing that, we write Again, I equals P times R times T. This time we're isolating T, so we will divide both sides of the equation by the principal and by the rate, so that we get, right, we get T equals I divide by P times R. So these are our three equations. They're all equivalent. We got to them from this first formula for the interest. But in each one we can use for different types of questions. And now we'll look briefly at the type of questions that these would help us with. So for instance, if we have 5 years that we can put some money aside, and we want to make, let's say, $50, and the bank offers us say 4%, how much do we have to invest? Right? In that case, we're looking for P, right? P is our principal. It's the money we invest. So in that case, let's do this in a different color. P equals, okay, so we want to make $50. That's our interest here. So I equals 50. The bank has offered us 4%. Again, when we write the percent, we'll write it as a fraction of 4 divided by 100. And we have, we said we have 5 years to make that money. So we write T equals 5. So this equals 5, and this equals 4%. That is 4/100ths. So now we can go ahead and calculate this. We can write this as 50 divided by, and let's multiply the 4 by 5. That's 20/100ths. And that equals, remember how when we divide by a fraction, we're actually multiplying by its inverse. So that equals 50 times 100 divide by 20, which is just 5,000 divided by 20, which is equal to 250. So we need $250 in order to make $50 over 5 years. Okay, we'll write that out. Our principal is equal to $250, and that's the answer. So that is one type of question we can answer. Let's look at the second formula. We'll use a different color for that. So here we want to figure out what the rate is. When does that happen? Well, say we know we have as a principal, we have $1,000. Okay, and we want to make, let's say at a minimum, we want to make, again, $50. And we really don't have much time. Let's say we have 2 years to make this money. How much is the minimum rate that the bank is offering that'll work out for our plans? Well, let's see. R equals, now instead of I, which is the interest, we'll write $50. That's what we want to make. Instead of P, we know we have 1,000, so we'll write 1,000. And time, we only have 2 years, so we'll write 2 here. So the interest rate is equal to 50 divided by 2,000. We can reduce the by the 2 zeros from here, and we have R equals 5 divided by 200. We want to write this as a percent, so the trick we can do is we can divide both the top and the bottom by 2, so that we have 100 on the as a denominator. So we have 2.5 divided by 100. So the minimum rate we can have is 2.5%. Below that, we won't make as much as we want in our very limited 2 years. Finally, we have this third version of the equation here, where we're looking at the time. So here, for instance, we may know how much we want to make. We know how much money we have to invest. We know what the bank is willing to offer us, and we want to see how long it's going to take. So let's say again that we are investing $1,000. And let's say that the bank is willing to offer us a rate of 5%, and that we want to make at least $100. So the interest that we want to make is at least $100. How long do we have to wait? Well, let's just substitute the values for the variables. So the time is equal to, again, our interest here is just $100. That's 100. We have $1,000 to invest, so we put that for our P. And the rate we're getting is 5%, which is just 5 divided by 100. Okay, let's simplify as usual. So T equals 100 divided by 5,000 divided by 100. And this equals, we flip it over, right? We have 100 times 100 divided by 5,000. Or T equals 100 times 100 is just 10,000. Divide by 5,000. And we find that we get T equals 10,000 divided by 5,000, just 2. So T equals 2 years. We will have to wait 2 years in order to make $100 at this wonderful rate that the bank is giving us at this time. So this was a quick review of the simple interest formula and how it can be used. Again, it's an example of a literal equation. And if this has been helpful, please like the video. If you have any questions or comments, please include those below. And the next few videos will have to do with geometric formulas for various areas and volumes. So good to see you again today, and I hope to see you next time again.